We have a gavel.
Get his shoe.
Meredith is not here. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody, to the Midwifery Board meeting. And we've got a bunch of new people here, so I thought maybe we could go down the roll as part of our roll call, or down the row as part of our roll call, and people introduce themselves. And a sentence or two, or three.
I'm Roxanne Anderson, new to the board. I work at a birth center in Keller, Texas, which is in the DFW area. And I've been involved in midwifery since 1988 in Texas.
Hi, I'm Victoria Meinhardt. I've been a midwife for 15 years. I am part owner of Austin Area Birthing Center here in Austin, Texas. I've been on the board since we were at Department of State Health Services, and then reapplied and came on here with TDLR. Glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Christy Martin. I am new to the board. I live in Fort Worth, Texas, and have been a midwife since hang on, I have to think about this, since 2006.
I'm Lori Fremgen. I've been a midwife here in Austin. Okay, I have to do math. 2000, I believe. And I think that's it.
Okay.
I am Erica Steele, and I'm new to the board as well, and I have been licensed since 2015, and Lori was one of my teachers. And that's it. I'm thrilled to be here and be a part.
I'm Mike Nix. I'm an OBGYN. I've been in town since 2002. Came with the board with the transition, and I work with the Dell Medical School.
I'm Destiny Hooper, and I am a mother of 3 girls, and I use midwife.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It looks like we're missing Meredith and Dr. Guillory, but we also have a quorum with everybody present. So let's go on to agenda item C. Is that what Derek's doing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, that's
Okay.
me. Okay, so hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Derek Burkhalter. I'm the Assistant General Counsel assigned to this program. So agenda item C is the refresher training, or for you new board members, your initial training for open meetings and the laws that govern these meetings and sort of provide public transparency and openness. So we're going to cover a few statutes. The first is the Open Meetings Act, the Administrative Procedure Act, and the Public Information Act. These three kind of make up the total of the laws that govern our process. So starting with the Open Meetings Act, the purpose is to ensure open and transparent government. It requires meetings of governmental bodies to be open to the public and to be preceded by public notice of the time, place, and subject matter of the meeting. And the provisions of the Act are mandatory and are to be liberally construed in favor of open government. So if there's any gray area, we lean towards transparency so the government, or so the public can see the process that government agencies use to establish the rules that govern occupations such as midwives. So a few key concepts that we need to cover. A quorum is a majority of the members of the advisory board or committee as fixed by rule or statute. So you're a 9-member board, which means 5 members would be a quorum. A quorum must be present in order to take official action. So because we have a quorum today, we can vote on things, take official action. If we had less than a quorum, we could discuss, but we couldn't actually take votes on anything or take official actions. And that's the third point here. The second concept is deliberation. Deliberation or discussion is defined as a verbal or written exchange between a quorum of a government body or between a quorum of a governmental body and another person concerning an issue within the jurisdiction of the governmental body. So that's key. It has to be an item of business within the jurisdiction of your body. And then we have a definition for meeting. A meeting occurs anytime a quorum of a governmental body engages in deliberation regarding public business or public policy over which the body has jurisdiction, or anytime they take formal action. And then notice. The act requires advance written notice of the date, time, place, and subject of each meeting held. That way the public has time to prepare and knows what we're going to discuss, and there are no surprises. TDLR provides this notice in the form of an agenda, which we publish with the Secretary of State. It gets put in the Texas Register, and we have to do that at least 7 days prior to the meeting, and it also has to be posted online by both agencies. And of course, a board may not engage in discussions about a subject that is not included on the agenda. So if we start to veer off topic, I may have to kind of advise you that we're straying from the agenda, and you know, we can put it on an agenda, a future agenda, but we can't discuss it at today's meeting. Okay, so what about social functions, conventions, and workshops? So keeping in mind that a meeting occurs whenever a quorum engages in discussion about an issue within the body's jurisdiction, can members ever meet in an informal setting without violating the act? And the answer is yes. Members are free to engage in conversation that is incidental to an event like a convention or a workshop. However, the gathering will be subject to the Open Meetings Act if a quorum of members is present and the members either engage in a discussion about the business or take formal action. So if 5 of you are at a convention, you can talk to each other, that's okay, but you just can't talk about the business of this body. Some key points to remember: always be aware of any situation occurring outside of a properly noticed meeting in which a quorum of members is present, and do not engage in substantive conversations relating to board business when a quorum is present. And beware the walking quorum. So let's talk about that. A walking quorum occurs when fewer than a quorum of members engage in discussion about business and then communicate those discussions to other members. So while fewer than a quorum are present for the initial conversation, any subsequent communication, passing on the substance of those conversations to other members could essentially create a quorum. So for example, a 5-member advisory board, which 3 would be a quorum, 2 members exchange phone calls and emails expressing thoughts on a subject, and they exchange research and ideas that they have individually. And then one of the board members subsequently forwards that email exchange to another member, and now you've engaged in a walking quorum because you've transmitted that information to a third party. So even though your initial meeting starts off as less than a quorum, you have to be careful about who you communicate the substance of that meeting or those conversations to. So walking quorums can occur during conference calls, video conferences, hallway discussions, emails, text messages, and other technological methods. And we especially have to be careful with social media such as Twitter, Facebook, and those types of applications, because you're never really sure who's going to read your comments or who's going to weigh in. And so that's just a little bit too dangerous. So I would advise you to not post anything about board business on social media. Some best practices to avoid the walking quorum: be careful about meeting in small groups and then communicating discussions to other members, as we talked about. Be careful about sending emails or text messages and forwarding those to other people. And again, be careful about social media posting. And also don't do something called polling, which is where we ask individual members on an individual basis for feedback or comments. that doesn't exempt you from the meeting requirements. Just because you do it in separate communications does not provide any sort of an exemption. Some guidelines for open sessions. A board or committee is limited to discussing the specific items on the agenda. And during public comment period, members of the public are given an opportunity to speak, and we usually set a 3-minute limit on those comments. The comment may raise a subject that's not on the current agenda, and so if that happens, that's why we don't engage in a discussion with the public commenters. So, essentially you're just here to hear their comments. You can ask clarifying questions if you don't really understand the comment, but we don't engage in a back and forth discussion with those commenters, particularly because it's probably, or it could be, an item that's not on the agenda. We can set it as an agenda item for a future meeting. More best practices. Members should limit discussions to the specific items on the agenda. Avoid discussing things that are not off the agenda. Don't wander off course. And of course, do not respond to or discuss issues raised during public comment that are not on the agenda. And again, we can identify those items for future agendas and then talk about them at a future meeting. So there are some penalties attached to violations of the Act. There are civil penalties. Any interested person, including the media, may petition the courts to stop actions taken in violation of the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act also specifically states that an action taken in violation of the Act is voidable. So if we were doing something like trying to pass a rule package or something, and we violate the Act in the course of doing that, someone could sue to either stop us from passing the rules, or once we've passed the rules, they could sue to have those rules deemed voided or not effective. In addition, we have some criminal penalties for violations. So members who knowingly participate in a walking quorum or who knowingly participate in a meeting that is closed to the public are subject to misdemeanor criminal penalties. It could be a fine of up to $500, confinement in jail for up to 6 months, or both the fine and jail time. So, there is some real risk attached, so you want to be particularly careful about who you talk to. Avoid communications that involve a quorum about official business outside of a noticed meeting. Of course, confine discussion items to the agenda. Confine discussion to items specifically posted on the agenda. So that's a little bit repetitive, but we just want to emphasize the point. There are a few resources if you would like more information on this topic. The Attorney General has a really good training video on their website, and they also have a really good handbook that gives some court cases that have dealt with this issue. The text of the statute is in Chapter 551 of the Government Code if you want to see the actual law. And then you're always welcome to call our General Counsel's office if you have any questions or you're unsure about anything. And these should all be in your meeting materials if you need these links or this number. Okay, so moving on to the Administrative Procedure Act. The purpose of this act is to establish minimum standards of uniform practice and procedure for state agencies and provide for public participation and transparency during the rulemaking process. So when we make new rules, this is kind of our Bible. We have to follow very closely by the APA. So what is a rule? A rule is a statement made by a state agency that implements, interprets, or prescribes law or policy, or describes the procedure or practice requirements of a state agency. So that's kind of a broad definition. It kind of encompasses, really a lot of things that agencies do. But an important thing is it's a statement of general applicability. So, dealing with one individual and their license predicament is not something we would have to create a rule to address necessarily, unless we were applying that policy to the general public at large. A rule is not just adding new rules, it also includes the amendment or repeal of the currently existing rules. And again, it does not solely relate to internal management or organization of a state policy or a state agency. So if it just involves internal processes like how we handle our documents or something like that, and it doesn't involve interaction with the public or it doesn't change the public's substantive rights, we don't necessarily need a rule for that. So sources for rulemaking, kind of where the ideas come from, a lot of them are in response to legislative changes like we will have discussing today. Advisory board work groups, which for those of you who don't know, less than a quorum of the advisory board can meet together with TDLR staff and kind of come up with ideas or suggestions. And because it's less than a quorum, they're not violating the Open Meetings Act, but it allows us to work with some of the board members and develop ideas. Also, your discussions here in these meetings could create an idea that we may decide to implement rules based on. TDLR staff themselves may come up with new ideas that we present to you. And then every 4 years, we have to review our rules to determine if they're still necessary, if they're still relevant. And so we do that every 4 years, just it is a requirement. Also, any interested person can file a rule petition with an idea that they have. And so talking a little bit more about a rule petition, any interested person may submit a petition to a state agency requesting the adoption of a rule. An interested person is anyone who is a Texas resident, a business entity located in Texas, or a governmental subdivision in Texas, or an organization that is not a state agency but is located in Texas. So essentially, anyone in Texas is an interested person for the purpose of this rule. So just to kind of walk you through the rulemaking process, just generally how it plays out. First, we have the idea for a rule that comes from one of the many sources we just talked about. And then we will take that idea and kind of draft it into rule form. And then we will send that to the advisory board for their consideration. And if the advisory board recommends publishing those rules, we will then publish it in the Texas Register for the public to see. There is a mandatory 30-day public comment period where anyone from the public can write in or email in their response to the proposal. The general counsel then reviews those comments and decides, often with the work group, if any changes should be made to the proposed rules. And then we take it back to the advisory board to see if they have any comments in response to the public comments, see if they have any recommended changes, or whether they would decide to go ahead and recommend it to the commission. And the commission, again, would also get all the public comments, and they would look at the advisory board's recommendation, and they may choose to adopt the rule. And if they do vote to adopt it, then it's again filed with the Texas Register to let the public know that that rule is about to take effect. And 20 days after the filing, the rule takes effect. We can also designate another date that's more than 20 days away. And so I mentioned the 4-year rule review process. This is just kind of showing you how that plays out. Once a program comes up for its 4-year review, we first publish our notice of intent to review, and that's again done in the Texas Register so the public knows that we're reviewing it. Again, the public has 30 days to comment to tell us whether they think the rules are still necessary and relevant. General counsel will review those comments and make a recommendation to the commission. The commission will review the rule, filing, and the comments and may choose to re-adopt the rule or not. And of course, the advisory board will be presented with any comments and may recommend changes themselves. So just some more resources for the Administrative Procedure Act. Again, the Attorney General's office has a lot of good information. These are where the actual law for the APA comes in, chapters 2001, 2006, and 2007 of the Government Code. And the Texas Register is maintained by the Secretary of State, as well as the Administrative Code, and so those resources are there as well. And the General Counsel's office, of course, is always available for help. So we'll move on to the Public Information Act. It's also called the Open Records Act. It is intended to allow each person information about the affairs of government and the official acts of public officials and employees. The act makes all documents, records, and other information relating to official business of the agency open to the public with some exceptions. And it includes any electronic communication created, transmitted, received, or maintained on any device if it is connected with official business. And so that includes you all. If there are emails to or from you concerning official agency business, we may have to disclose that under the Public Information Act. And again, we construe it liberally in favor of granting requests for information in the interest of transparency. So once we receive a request, if you receive a request, or anything that looks like a request for information or documents, forward it on to us as quickly as possible. Because we have a very tight deadline to respond. We have to respond within 10 days. There are some exceptions to that. But we cannot ask why someone wants the records. We can't ask them for clarification, like exactly which documents do you want, but not why do you want them. There are certain things that we can redact from the records by law, date of births, email addresses, certain documents concerning education records, and of course, health information records. And again, the Attorney General has some good information on their website if you like more detail. They have a great handbook as well. The law is contained in Chapter 552 of the Government Code. And of course, you can always call our office if you have questions or issues. And this is the email address that people can use to send open records requests as well. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any questions about this? Yes.
I do have a question, because we are dealing with medical records all the time in our complaint processes and stuff like that. How is that handled? Because sometimes, I think I'm asking because sometimes the respondent needs to see the records, or sometimes the expert witness needs to see the records, or I'm just wondering how much is redacted and if it even falls under this.
Well, so if it's a request from the public for records, we can basically redact any information that would identify a particular individual. So, we can provide as much as possible without providing personally identifiable information. If you're talking about in the context of like a court case or something playing out, we would seal those records, and so they would not be open to the public if they contain those sorts of private health records.
Okay. And then how about access to the respondent or the expert witness? Does that apply at all?
As far as the expert witness, they would sign certain agreements with TDOR agreeing to maintain that confidentiality, so that would allow them to view the records and provide us advice. As far as, I'm sorry, what was
The respondent.
The respondent themselves, there are rules, kind of the litigation route has its own kind of rules as to what can be turned over in the discovery process. We may, if we see a potential violation of confidentiality laws, we would take steps to ensure that that confidentiality is maintained by the respondent or their attorney.
Okay. Okay.
Any further questions? Okay, that concludes item C on our agenda.
Thanks, Derek. Okay, I'd like to move agenda item E, which is public comment, to the end. So if anybody wants to make a public comment, don't forget to fill out a public comment sheet and submit it to Anna? Yeah, okay. So let's go on to agenda item F, staff reports. Leonard.
Excuse me, Chair, if we could get to the approval of minutes while we have the
Oh,
quorum and
my
everything as
goodness.
well.
Yes, I'm sorry, I skipped over that. Yeah. So, agenda item D, the approval of minutes. Everybody had it in their packet. A lot of you weren't here. Can they vote on it, even if they weren't here? Yes, okay. Does
I'll
anybody?
make a motion to accept the minutes.
Okay. A second? All in favor? Okay. Okay, now we're at agenda item F.
Yes. Good afternoon, is this thing on? Good afternoon, advisory board members.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
hear you, yeah.
My name is Leonard Rivas. I'm the licensing manager for the Midwives program. Today, I'll be presenting the licensing report. We have a few staff updates. We hired Steve Ledesma from the Department of Agriculture. Steve worked at TDLR previously and has come back and joined TDLR. We are in the process of hiring for another position. We lost Vicki Watson to retirement December 31st. So we are in the process of filling Vicki's position. So that's it for staff updates. And then I'll be going over the licensing report with you as well. So you should have a copy of the licensing report in front of you. The report contains totals for fiscal year 2018, 2019, and what we've processed so far for the first quarter of fiscal year 2020. As you can see, we've processed 3 new applications, and your total population at the end of the first quarter was 314. And I just want to say one other thing before I conclude my report. We're in the process of renewing, so if you're out there listening, you can encourage people to get their renewals submitted as soon as possible.
Yes.
That concludes my report. Do you have any questions? No? Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Midwifery Board. My name is Dawn Robinson. I am a manager here in customer service. I am here today to report on our personnel updates and our staff personnel updates. Goes accordingly. We have, since our last meeting in January of 2019, customer service has hired 2 new managers to replace the outgoing managers. We've hired 2 new quality performance analysts, 3 new team leads, 6 new customer service reps, and we are currently in the process of hiring 8 more customer service reps. So that would include our personnel, staff. In front of you, you currently have the midwifery customer service contacts for fiscal year 2019, and for currently up until December fiscal year 2020. Year to date, as of December, we have a total of 172 contacts. That's emails and phone calls. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Enforcement?
Good afternoon, Advisory Board. I'm Karen Cox. I'm Senior Prosecutor in the Enforcement Division, and we have a lot to report since the last meeting. We have some case highlights. The first 2 cases you will note are agreed orders, and they are both for administering a prescription drug without standing orders from a physician, and the respondents paid $750 in full in those for those agreed orders. On March 19th, an agreed order was entered in which the respondent accepted an administrative penalty of $300 for failing to collect and document client care data, and that fine has been paid entirely. A default order was entered on June 14th, 2019, in which the department imposed a penalty of $4,000 for failing to submit the relevant records necessary to conduct an investigation. An agreed order was entered on November 12th, 2019, in which the respondent accepted an administrative penalty of $1,875 for failing to initiate emergency transfer while attending a birth when the fetus began exhibiting a non-reassuring heart rate pattern. Key statistics: fiscal year through November 30th of 2019, which is all we've got for fiscal year 2020, which began on September 1. We opened 5 cases, resolved 3, entered 1 final order, and collected and assessed both penalties of $1,875. In fiscal year 2019, which began on September 1, 2018, and ended August 31st, 2019, we opened 23 cases, resolved 27, had 4 final orders, assessed $5,800 in penalties, and collected $1,800. For fiscal year 2018, we opened 11 cases and resolved 11 cases. There were 2 final orders. They assessed penalties of $2,500, and we collected $500. May I answer any questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, Ms. Rimsey.
I'm wondering if, because we have some new people here, if you could tell us the difference between an agreed order and a default order?
Happily.
Thank you.
I'll give a brief, for the new ones, I'll give a brief description of the enforcement process. We start with a complaint. We're complaint-driven. Some programs have inspections, but in your particular program, we operate mostly on consumer complaints and then also criminal history background check cases. But in general, complaints come into our intake section. Our intake section reviews to see if we have jurisdiction. That is, jurisdiction means, is this a person we regulate doing a thing we regulate? Or is it a person who is doing a thing we regulate that should have a license and doesn't? Someone who does have a license, and are they doing something within the scope of their license? If those things are present, intake opens a case and refers it to the investigation, to the investigators. The investigators are neutral fact finders. They collect information, they talk to the participants, to the complainant, to the respondent. The respondent is the licensee against whom the complaint was filed. They talk to any necessary witnesses, including at that point experts if we need them. And then when they finish collecting their information, they refer it to the prosecutor. The prosecutor can do one of 3 things. They can close the case with either a warning letter or a closure letter. That's if they think that there's not enough evidence to proceed, if they think that there was a violation but it was either completely ameliorated, or the typical one for warning letters is someone let their license expire and renewed it before it gets on the prosecutor's desk. Those are closed with a warning letter. Those are not disciplinary actions. We do not report them to the legislature. If the prosecutor decides to go forward with a notice of alleged violation, they issue what's called an NOAV, and that states the violation, of what we think is the violation based on the investigation. And then this is the default order, agreed order, final order point. If the respondent gets the NOAV and agrees with the violations in it, that person can pay a fine and sign a settlement agreement, and that is an agreed order. We enter an order that our executive director, Brian Francis, signs that makes certain violations, or makes certain findings, and imposes certain orders, usually to pay a penalty, sometimes to add, if it's in an appropriate profession, sometimes the agreed order can impose the requirement of taking some extra continuing education. But that's an agreed order where the parties agree, and that goes to our executive director. If the person doesn't respond, then, and the pleading just hangs out there, they receive it, we get proof that they received it through the post office, we get the green card back, then, but they don't answer us, they don't call us, then that results in a default order. And the default order imposes the full fine, and again, that's something that our executive director signs. If they request a hearing, then we go to a hearing at SOA. That's like a trial, but there's no jury. And the administrative law judge, works for the State Office of Administrative Hearings, issues what's called a proposal for decision. The PFD is their opinion about what they think happened and whether or not they think it's a violation, and it contains legal arguments and findings of fact and lengthy explanations of what happened in the hearing. The proposal for decision is heard in front of the Commission of Licensing and Regulation, and our commission then can either agree with the ALJ or they can disagree with it, and that's called a final order. That results in a final order that either imposes a penalty or doesn't. But those are our 3 types of orders: agreed, default, and final. The commission signs the final order, and our executive director signs agreement and default orders.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank
That was helpful.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any
Anytime.
questions at all? No? I'm curious about the penalties that aren't paid.
Yeah.
How do we, what do we do about that?
If it's a, in some cases, we can refer them for collections, but that's usually
Okay.
a big fine. If it's someone that has a license, they can't renew their license until they pay their penalty.
Okay. And then same with like this default order? I mean, this person didn't submit their records. They're not
Yes.
participating in the complaint to some degree.
They wouldn't be able to renew, if this
Okay.
person wants to renew a license,
They
they would
can't.
have to pay the fine
Okay.
before their license can be renewed.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay. Anybody else?
You asked my question.
Oh. Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome, Lauren.
Education?
Good afternoon, board members. Welcome, and welcome to our new board members, Erica, Christy, and Roxanne. It's nice to have y'all here. My name is Kayla Potter with Education and Examination. I have some personnel updates as well as statistical information I would like to go over with you. So since last year, when we met back in January, we have grown. We have grown so much. Education and Examination has had to split off into two groups. So what we've done is we've hired two managers, and we have our first manager, Angie Schmidt, in the back. And she is the manager for our licensing accreditation team. And then we have Michael Strawn over here. He is the manager for the outreach, audit, and policy team. Excuse me. So we also have two team leads under them, Shanesty and Lorraine, who are not here today, but they will be leading day-to-day operations within those two teams. So the first statistical information that we have are the jurisprudence exam results. So what we do is, since we don't do the national exam, we only do the state JP exam upon initial licensure as well as renewal. We track that information on a month-to-month basis. Right now, in fiscal year 2020, it is too early to see any trends, but what you can see from fiscal year 2018 and 19 is a 40% increase. What we did is I had a team member track the population as well for the licensed midwives in Texas, and we see a correlation between that. There was an increase of 43 people licensed, so that explains the increase in jurisprudence exams. The next information we have are the midwife school curriculum courses. We did end up licensing one course back in May of 2019, so bringing our total count to 3 courses. If you have any questions regarding any of these items, please let me know.
No, anybody? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Katie, you can't run. Oh, my goodness.
It's not graceful.
Wow. We can talk about that later.
Do I need her to say that I'm able to come up, or may I just begin?
Oh, it's her. Can she come up?
Yes, please, share with us.
Okay. So I'm Katie Bryce with Regulatory Program Management, Medical and Health Professions. You have my staff report, but I'm going to go over some things. We have hosted 2 Midwives Educational Summits since your last meeting. The first one was on January 9th, 2019 in Austin, and the second was on July 26, 2019 in Hurst, Texas. The next summit will be tomorrow in San Marcos. Staff conducted 3 midwife course inspections along with field inspection staff on January 28th and 29th in El Paso, April 29th and 30th in Austin, and September 5th and 6th in Houston. We will continue to assist customer service with regulatory program management related emails. We have produced a guidance statement on Senate Bill 1264, which was included in your packet. Senate Bill 1264 protects consumers from surprise medical bills and emergencies and in cases where the consumer had no choice of providers. The bill prohibits balance billing by out-of-network providers and to state-regulated insurance plan enrollees. This bill may not really impact your profession, but we've included this guidance statement as a reference for you all. Under public outreach, I was able to attend 2 pre-conference workshops on April 25th at the Association of Texas Midwives Conference in Grapevine, which were really educational. Heather Muir and I attended the Midwives Alliance of North America Conference in Bastrop, excuse me, at the end of October and November, which was also very educational, and we were very happy to be able to attend it locally. Personnel updates. Amanda Smith has joined our group as an executive assistant. She has many years of experience in regulatory activities from DSHS. And Charlotte Melder has been promoted to the director of our Division of Regulatory Program Management. Under the medical and health professions section update, we've been busy during the last legislative session. We reviewed over 50 bills, analyzed the impact of proposed legislation, and served on cost estimate teams for bills that relate to the medical and health profession programs. We are currently leading bill implementation teams to implement the requirements of the new laws that were passed. And Medical and Health Professions Group has produced and distributed 9 issues of the TDLR Health Monitor. The latest issue can be found on the Midwives Program webpage, and links to the previous issues can be found under agency newsletters on the main TDLR website. Senate Bill 202 implementation report is also included in your packet. This report was published in December 2019. A link to the report can be found on the TDLR webpage under agency reports. Senate Bill 202 transferred 13 programs from DSHS to TDLR starting in 2016. The bill requires TDLR to produce an annual report on the progress of the transfer. This implementation report is the final report required under the bill. And also, you were given the State Auditor's Office report on health-related programs at the Department of Licensing and Regulation. The audit report was published in August 2019. The State Auditor's Office reports are available on the internet at the State Auditor's Office website. The audit covered all 13 DSHS transfer programs, but focused on massage and speech-language pathology. The report finds that TDLR has developed processes and related controls to administer and regulate its 13 health-related programs as required by statute, rule, and department policies. However, there were some improvements that need to be made. For example, processes and controls for monitoring of licensed facilities, which doesn't apply to your program, but it does for massage, need to be strengthened. And this concludes my report. Are there any questions?
I want to thank you guys for coming to our conferences. It really means a lot that you come and that you're learning, and you come with such an open spirit.
We always enjoy it.
Yeah.
And like I said, they are always very educational.
Yeah,
So
it's really fun to have you guys
we appreciate
there.
being invited.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, at the national conference, many people came from across the country and even across the world, and some people were blown away that our government agency was in the room, in the house. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a great experience to be there.
I would second that.
Yeah.
Had a great time with you.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Katie.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Julianne Crocker. I'm going to be presenting the Field Inspections Report today. And I have to say, some of the other divisions have kind of stolen our thunder. Our statistics, we did conduct 3 inspections over the last 2 fiscal years. So our big news is that we have big changes within our personnel. We've expanded our program from 3 regions to 4. So I'd like to say congratulations to Juan Munoz, who's our newest regional manager. And also let you know that I've taken a new position within the agency and am now a management analyst in our Enterprise Project Management Office. So I will be turning over the reins for the work I have done with the midwifery program to James Turner. So
Great, welcome.
I brought James with me. We will also be hiring my replacement. She will begin on February 3rd, so Monday. Her name is Colleen Cloudy, and she'll be coming to us from HHSC. We're very excited to have her. And that concludes my report. Any questions? Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Mary.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm going to give the executive report today, and I want to start off like everybody else with personnel updates. We've grown, we've expanded, we've stretched. So to handle all of that, we've also had some retirements and some folks leave. So the last time you were here, Carla was sitting here. She retired. She's
Couldn't
come back
she wait
to-
for our meeting?
Well, no. Let me tell you, she has come back. I'm sorry, Mary Winston, TDLR. She's come back to visit. She looks fantastic. I mean, not that she didn't look great before, but I literally said, I'm like, hey, you look great. So I can't retire yet, so one day. But Carla James retired. And upon her retirement, our executive director, Brian Francis, knew, and Carla would say, well, they just needed 2 folks to replace one Carla. True, and we also needed just more folks to kind of shoulder all of that expansion and stretching and growing. So last time we met, we had a deputy executive director, and Carla retired, and we had Mike Aris-Mendez. Mike's still here, but we needed some more folks to shoulder all of this. One of those folks is sitting here to my right, Mr. David Gonzalez. David has been at the agency as long as I've been married, 23 years. Yeah. He helps me remember my anniversary. So I remember it, but the years start to kind of go together, you know. I know the date. But David was formerly the director of our RPM division, which is now under the directorship of Charlotte Melder. Our other deputy executive director, because we had a town hall meeting this morning and we kept saying the DEDS, deputy executive director. So our other DED is Christina Kaiser.
I don't know if that's a good
acronym.
acronym.
I don't know.
Doesn't bode well.
I don't know. But Christina Kaiser is the former director of our enforcement division, and now she's the other deputy executive director. And so that's our updates, and hope I didn't forget anything. For B, we have updates from the legislative regular session, the 86th. Derek has already taken his place over there, and he's going to talk to you about some of those updates and some of the work that you'll have to do with those. Next is the sunset review process. Sunset is a legislative arm, and the sunset staff is tasked, bless you, with evaluating our state agencies. How well are we doing? It's kind of like a strategic plan, but like with way more teeth. So how are we doing? What can we do better? Should we even be here? Should we be doing the things we're doing? They do a really deep dive. We've had, and I have David's sheet, and it's grown, so he's changed it. I told him, I noticed you scratched out some stuff, because initially we said 27 meetings, but that was in the fall. Now we've had about 50 internal meetings with them. Small meetings, big meetings. They've come to several of our advisory board meetings. They are doing a deep dive. We've had 13 meetings scheduled with smaller groups of staff. And at this stage, a lot of confidential data. They've reached out to several folks. Some of you may have spoken with them. All that's confidential data right now, and they're doing their report. We did a self-evaluation report earlier. They're gathering everything, and we're looking at a public hearing approximately July. So at that point, we're not the only agency being sunsetted, or in the sunset process, rather, but we are one of them. Because of all of our expansion, what they are reviewing now are what we like to call our legacy programs. Those are the programs that came to us prior to September 1, 2016. After that point, we'll do a smaller, abbreviated sunset, where they will just take on those later programs. And this one's the ones from the beginning. The smaller abbreviated process will happen after this process ends. Communication outreach statistics for the last 6 months. Midwives website has been visited almost 9,500 times, about 51 times per day. 53% of those visitors access the site from desktop computer, 42 from smartphone, and 5% from a tablet. Top reasons for visiting the site: administrative rules, statute, midwives, educational summit, very good, that's tomorrow, forums, and frequently asked questions. Last but not least, introduction of the anti-trafficking unit. I've been doing this virtually. This last session, we were afforded monies by the legislature to actually have a whole group of folks, to hire them and get them trained up to be a part of this unit. Prior to this, we had one individual who we could had enough money to pay her salary and to let her go out and do as much as she could for the fight against human trafficking. But now we have a whole team. Joining that team, and they were hired, they started the 2nd of January. So joining Jennifer Harless, who was the one-woman show at that time, is, and I'm going like by memory because I need to do that, and I'm going like by where they sit in my head. But we have Chuck Winkler, Ray Carswell, Jennifer Ignacio, Alex Ortiz, Jordan Strain, Gloria Newton, and Brian Cottle. This is rounding out our new anti-trafficking unit. As you know, we have enforcement that's in our investigators in our enforcement division. They are complaint-based. So when there is a complaint, they go out. We have our field inspections. Our field inspectors go out on a periodic basis. This team has been established and financed through this last session to kind of be that gap filler, to work with both our enforcement and field inspections for when we have occasion to come across, we say IMBs, or illicit massage businesses, because we also regulate massage, and we know that these things go on beyond massage. So I haven't pulled them out of training, and they've been doing quite a bit of training. We were in Houston a couple of days ago. We had great visits with the police department, the mayor's office, a couple of task forces, and some non-governmental organizations, because it really does take a village. And so we're trying to do that. Now that we've done some outside training, we're pulling them in, and we thank so much. I want to thank Tanya, Field Inspections, because we've like pulled some of her folks in and said, hey, can y'all give us a training for a week? And can we kind of tag along and learn what you know and ask questions, and they're going to bring it back to us. And then I've tapped the manager in enforcement, Greg Dotson. Hey, Greg, how about that next week? Well, we're going to give them a week off to kind of, digest all they have learned, and then they're going to go out with our enforcement investigators. And then we're going to meld, and we're going to grow another arm onto this TDLR octopus, or whatever we want to call it, cephalopod that we have going on. And that is my report. Do you have any questions?
Sort of.
Okay.
So how does the human trafficking, all of this apply to midwives? I mean, I think it can possibly apply to us. Do we need to form a work group for this? Do we?
Well, Laurie,
training? What do we need to do?
You are just looking ahead of this.
Am I looking ahead?
No. There's going to be some requirements that Derek's gonna talk about, because you are healthcare practitioners.
Yeah.
So I remember our last summit, we had some conversation, and Ms. Harless was there, and you were like, So there's some training.
Yeah, because at first I was thinking, no. I mean, we mostly help families, but then we're outside of the system.
Yes.
And so I think there's potential.
There's potential, and we're seeing, my eyes were open, and I know several of our team members' eyes were open. We, Children at Risk, which is a nonprofit organization in Houston, we did a bus tour. And on the bus tour, they operated from Yelp for people who use illicit massage businesses, otherwise known as rub maps. And we took some of those brag pages and we rode around.
Wow.
And pulled right in there. We fought the urge to yell at the folks going in, excuse me, for their lunch. And it was very eye-opening, because it's not a it's a great area thing, it's a bad area thing. We went through all different types of neighborhoods where we had very elite private schools, and just beside Trader Joe's or wherever, you know, you just think that these things aren't there because we don't utilize them, and they have enough forethought to look like a legitimate business. But thank goodness for those wonderful reviews. So there are ways that we're going to dig into what's going on. So may not touch you 90% of the time, maybe 99, but just in our last summit, after Ms. Harless was there and you looked at, you know, all of the paraphernalia she had, and I know, and I'm putting you on the spot, I'm sorry, but you really were like, oh my gosh, I think I may have, you know, we've all kind of had that thought. And now we do have more folks, and we'll have boots on the ground and more research. Yes, ma'am.
Victoria Meinhardt. So kind of seeing it from a perspective of the birth center world, where we're serving hundreds of families every year. It's real different from the home birth world, where you're going into their homes and you're seeing how they live. Birth centers, we don't. I mean, some birth centers do home visits, and a lot of the birth centers in Texas don't do home visits. So they're coming to us. And so we've also had to learn how to suss out domestic violence issues differently, because we're not in their home. We have to ask the questions and pull the woman aside and, you know, get her privately so she can communicate with us about what her situation is at home. So this just kind of dovetails into that, you know, those questions that you can ask a person to help determine whether she's in an abusive situation or not. So a lot of intake forms and electronic medical records will have these questions. We utilize one. I know some of the private practice midwives as well utilize electronic medical forms, where there are those questions that are built into the system. So I mean, I think we're just barely scratching the surface of this.
Yeah.
And I think some training for midwives in all areas would be useful. So we can learn to identify these women without them having to actually tell us, because I think they give it away in the way they're behaving.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a hotline. There's several hotlines, and we have different campaigns in several state agencies. TDLR is part of the Human Trafficking Coordinating Council, and how we can have, we met with the special advisor to Mayor Sylvester Turner in Houston, and she talked about, I just enjoyed meeting her, talked about touch points, what we can do, what they can do as a municipality, what we can do as a licensing and regulatory authority, what our licensees can do, because they're the boots on the ground while we sit in these, you know, beige walls or eggshell, I don't know. But, you know, thank you, Vicki. So that's, and now it's the law. So some of that education, and Derek's gonna discuss how that's gonna play into your licensing.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else for Mary?
Oh, let me say thank you, Anna. I got a blip as I was talking. She's like, if you want to say the hotline number, it's a great plug, 1-888-373-7888. Or text help or info to be free, 233-733. And we'll have that everywhere, 1-888-373-7888. Thank you. Sorry, Lori.
Thank you. Okay, Derek.
Could you say that number one more time?
Sure. 1-888-373-7888. And because it's on YouTube, this will live on. We don't know how long, but if you're watching it, you will, 1-888-373-7888. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Derek, you have the next 3 agenda items, G, H, and I.
Yes, that's correct.
Are you just going to go in that order?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Is this mic working?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so hello again. My name is Derek Burkhalter. I'm the Assistant General Counsel for TDLR, assigned to this program. And before I get started, let me just get my screen going here. I wanted to kind of make this a little bit more visual for you guys this time. Okay, so as you may know, in 2019, we had the 86th session of the Texas legislature. There were a couple pieces of legislation that were passed and signed into law that affect your program. And so department staff have put together some language, some proposed rules for you. Before we look at the rule language, I wanted to let you look at the actual bill language. And the first one I want to talk about is House Bill 2059, which begins on page 69 of your materials.
Oh, thank you for that. There. Ooh. Okay.
Okay, so HB 2059 created a new chapter in the Occupations Code, Chapter 116, titled Training Course on Human Trafficking Prevention. And so this chapter, if you scroll down to the next page, if you look at section 116.003, training required for license renewal, this is the section that impacts your industry. A healthcare practitioner, other than a physician or nurse who are covered in other sections below, shall successfully complete a training course described above as a condition for renewal of a license issued to the healthcare practitioner under this title. And so this title is Title 3 of the Occupations Code, and the Midwives chapter falls under Title 3. So you are considered a healthcare provider for the purposes of this bill. And so this new training requirement does apply to midwives renewing their licenses. So the training course, the Health and Human Services Commission is in charge of this course. They will approve courses that can be used for this requirement, and they are supposed to have at least one free course on their website. And so we have had meetings with them. They have not yet put together a course. Let me take you to their website. They have a public statement. If you look at the second paragraph here, HHSC, Health and Human Services Commission, is currently in the process of developing its own human trafficking training, which will be offered to all healthcare practitioners free of charge. While healthcare practitioners will not need to comply with the new requirement until September 1st, 2020, HHSC anticipates publishing its training on the agency's website by summer 2020. So that's where we stand with that. The requirement kicks in September 1st. And so it looks like, they're hoping to have, and hopefully they will have, their training set up by the summer. And so I'll go ahead and take you to the bill language that we've come up with to implement that requirement. It starts on page 66 of your materials. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is in our rules in Chapter 115 of Title 16 of the Administrative Code. Section 115.1.14, license renewal. And so if you scroll down, we've added a new subsection B to this requirement, to this section that states, let me zoom in a little bit. For each license renewal on or after September 1st, 2020, the licensed midwife must complete the human trafficking prevention training required under Occupations Code Chapter 116 and provide proof of completion as prescribed by the department. So this is standardized language that staff has come up with. It applies to, I think, 10 of our different programs. It has been approved by the governor's office, and so this is just kind of the standard language. Once we get, a few years into the future, we may revise this to make it just more of a standard provision with a list of others. But because it had kind of a start date, we wanted to make it its own provision. So that's the rule change to that section that we've come up with to address that human trafficking training. And so moving on, we have a second change, and that's to section 115.70, standards of conduct. And it removes In subpart 1C, it removes conviction of a felony or a misdemeanor involving moral turpitude. And so the reason we've done that is the legislature passed Senate Bill 1531, and it begins on page 74 of your materials. And so that's the beginning of it, but the relevant part is actually on page 77 of your materials. Well, going back up to, okay, here we go. Okay, so you see, this is the bill language. They've amended section 203.404 in your chapter. So these are the different reasons that the department may discipline a licensed midwife or refuse to renew a midwife's license or application. And you can see that they've just stricken that same language out. And the reason is not because they don't think that, you know, crimes of moral turpitude are a problem. It's just that this standard, that phrase moral turpitude, is very vague, and it's not clear what crimes that applies to. It's a very subjective standard. And so rather than have that, we would apply our standard criminal conviction guidelines that specifically outline which crimes are relevant to your profession. And so going back to the bill language, or I'm sorry, the proposed rule language on page 66 of your materials, actually now 67, you can see we've stricken out the same language. And so we're literally just doing exactly what the bill did. And then we re-lettered the remaining sections accordingly. And so that small change and the one concerning the human trafficking, that's all we're dealing with in this particular rules package. Basically, we will be seeking a recommendation to publish this proposal in the Texas Register so the public can have 30 days to comment on it. And then we'll look at those comments and we will bring it back to you so you can decide whether you would like to recommend adoption by the commission or not. So with that, I'll open it up for any discussion you would like to have, any questions or any motions.
Are you asking for us to vote on this today?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
asking, after you've had a chance to discuss, if you need
Okay.
to, that we vote to recommend publication in the Texas Register.
Okay. Did anybody have any thoughts?
Victoria Meinhardt, I actually have absolutely zero objection to what's happening here. It just looks like you're following the law, and the wording is pretty generic and clear.
Mhm.
I mean, anybody
Mhm.
have any argument about what they're offering? No?
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 Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I would make a motion to publish these in the register so that they can be commented on.
I'll second that. Christy Martin.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is that everyone? Okay.
Okay, so we have a unanimous vote. Do we have that recorded? Okay. Okay, so that concludes agenda item G. Moving on to H, it's actually a related topic. We're still dealing with HB 2059 and the human trafficking training. So you just voted to publish a rule that would require that for renewal. Our executive director, Brian Francis, wants each advisory board to form a work group to consider whether that training should be included as part of the required continuing education hours for renewal. In other words, it would substitute in for, I think right now we have 20 required hours. So we would, our executive director wants a work group to consider whether that should be included as part of those 20 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not asking for a decision today. We're just essentially asking for the subject to be assigned to a work group, either a currently existing work group or if you want to create a new work group. And I don't know if you want to do that now or wait till we get to agenda item J with work group updates and assignments. I know we have a couple, 2 or 3 new board members.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Mike Nix, do we need a work group? I mean, is it required to go through the process of a work group to make that decision, I guess?
That is the preferred process of our executive director. I think we just want the industry to get together and study it and give us an official opinion as to whether that is a good idea, whether it can or should be done.
I have a question. Destiny Hooper, since the training has not been created yet, I'm just wondering about the value of it for midwives. You know, what if it's not very specific to midwives and then you're including it in the 20 hours and it's really like very vaguely related to midwifery? I mean, it's very important, but I'm saying if the people who make it don't really specifically
Yeah.
say this is like a section about midwives.
Right.
And then we're saying, oh, we're going to include this in our 20 hours, but it's not really, maybe it should be in addition to.
And you make a really good point, and that's exactly why we want the board to consider that issue and study it and take a look at what the Health and Human Services Commission puts together and help us as a department to decide the question that you just asked. Is it relevant enough to consider a part of continuing education, or should it just be an extra requirement?
Victoria Meinhardt, I have a question for my board members. Do we feel like this topic could be handed to an existing work group, like either licensing or education? Is that possible for one of those existing work groups to take up this conversation? Or do we feel like we need to put together a whole new work group, which it looks like it wouldn't even be in motion until after these guys finish their initial preparation of a class?
Right.
Mary Winston, TDLR, other advisory boards have put it in the education and examination work groups.
That
They're
seems to make
standing
sense
work groups,
to me, yeah, that it could go in education examination if that's what we're trying to do. But at the same time, there's not really much to discuss until, something is given to us to talk about.
Yes, Mary Winston again. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like. HHSC is working on that.
Sure.
So Brian Francis and I say Francis, we have like a lot of Brians lately, but our executive director wants input, and we want input from the licensees. We just don't
Sure.
want to on high stick it here. So
Yeah.
you can make that decision. You're not necessarily setting a meeting today, but just kind of making that decision, and we'll have more information.
I think that there's methods and tools that midwives can use to elicit information from their clients who are in a situation, in a sex trafficking situation that might not even realize. I mean, I think that there's ways, but again, these HHSC is going to come up with a training, and then that will give us a template to work with, I'm assuming, and then we can make recommendations from there. Am I going in the right direction as to what we're trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds reasonable.
Right, because it sounds like that each profession has to take that training and adopt it to their profession as what they're going to see and what they're going to witness and what they're actually going to have put in front of them.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Christy Martin.
Oh, sorry. They're shaking their heads back there.
Oh, good.
Hold on.
Come correct me.
Hold your thought for just a second. Okay.
Sorry, Heather Muir, Regulatory Program Management. What the bill does is it requires HHSC to approve courses. It is not specific to each individual profession. It's just a healthcare provider. There were specific provisions in the bill, say for doctors, that said that it could be a part of their ethics, but it was not clear for the other health professions. That's why we just want y'all to take a look at it. But it's not for this advisory board to develop a training. If there is a provider who wants to develop a course that's specific to midwives, they can do that, but they have to apply to HHSC to get that specific course approved. And also to kind of talk to Destiny's questions about, part of the 20 hours. The board does not have to specifically approve
the whole course. So you have the option to set a limit. So if the course ends up being 8 hours, which it's probably not going to be, I think based on our discussions with HHSC already, it's going to be about an hour in length. But it's within your discretion to say, out of our 20 hours, we're going to say an hour is adequate, so you can allow up to 1 hour for CE, and anything above that, then no, we're not going to count. So those are kind of the things that we want y'all to talk through as a work group of the board and come to an agreement and make a presentation to the board.
Okay, so
Thank you.
you just answered one of my questions. Can the work group create a course? But it looks like that's not
the goal of the
goal.
work group,
Okay.
no. And,
Okay.
and as far as I know, TDLR has no desire right now
Okay.
to create and be approved
Okay.
for, as the training provider.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay. She answered my question. Oh, yeah. That was perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Okay. Why don't we save the assignment of this to when we get to the work group agenda item, if that's okay?
Okay. So moving along to item I. Okay, so this item concerns a rule package that was passed last year by the commission, and one of the rules was not adopted by the commission. This was in section 115.115E6, and I can pull up the current rule language. It is on page 98 of your materials. So this is the section on labor and delivery. Subsection E, we're talking about conditions that require the midwife to initiate immediate emergency transfer. And the particular item that we're concerned with is 6, a non-reassuring fetal heart rate pattern. So as you may know, the board with the department had developed some language to make that more specific, to include specific patterns that would fit this phrase. When the suggested language was proposed to the commission, some commissioners had concern. The concerns were that I think one commissioner wanted the continuous electronic fetal monitoring equipment to be used by all midwives in at-home births. She was not comfortable with the intermittent auscultation methods and the technology used for that. And I think the concern was either have that technology available or make it fully clear to each client about the differences in the technology and the availability or non-availability of that technology by midwives.
Derek, can I interject for
Yes.
a second? I feel like she didn't understand how we actually do it. I
And-
don't think she had a full picture.
And I kind of agree with you, and
Yeah.
the problem was that in that limited setting, in the 5 to 10 minutes that we had to present those rules, we weren't able to convey to her the full situation. And so that's why this particular agenda item is suggesting that we have a work group discussion, and we invite the commissioners who have concerns so that we can sit down with them and let them look at it, explain, educate them on what midwives do, and what the rule is actually trying to do. And so we don't have to have that discussion at the commission meeting. We can educate those concerned commissioners and see if we need different rule language, or they're okay with the same rule language, or we need to update our informed consent forms or something like that. But this is something that we need to address, and I think we probably need to form a work group, invite the commission, any interested commissioners, as long as we don't have a quorum issue with them, and just study and discuss and educate and come up with some proposed language.
Okay.
Victoria here, that's something, the standards of care.
Yeah,
would struggle.
probably. Okay.
Okay, so we're assigning that to possibly the standard of care group, or we're waiting until item J where we assign
Well,
work groups?
we might as well just move to item J.
Okay.
Unless,
That was all that I had really
Anything
to
else?
just
Okay.
kind of lay the issue out there and let's form a
Yeah.
work group. And so that concludes item I.
Thank
does
you.
anybody have any questions about that? I mean, that was kind of a long process for us to get handed right back to us.
Looks like we're just
So-
going back to the drawing board,
Yeah.
Lori. It'll be great.
Thanks for your optimism.
I am very optimistic. I am. It looks like we're going to get
No, it's fine.
feedback from the
Yeah.
national commissioners, and
No,
that's fine.
Yeah,
That's
it
great.
it actually will be a great opportunity to educate and
Yeah.
share information.
Sounds
So, but anybody else have any?
So everything else that we put forward went through, it was just that one?
Right, correct.
ma'am.
Just that one particular, and I can pull up the rule language that we had proposed that got rejected if you'd like. It's right
Christy
here.
Martin, I would like that.
Okay. Let me zoom in a little bit if I can.
Mhm.
Okay, so the language that is stricken out in brackets is the old language that's being removed, and the underlined language is new language that we were adding.
Mhm.
And that's what they rejected that language.
Correct. They did not adopt that language, and so the old language remains in effect, a non-reassuring fetal heart rate pattern.
And that language is, it's a national standard for intermittent auscultation.
The new language,
This right here, the proposed language.
Mhm.
So, but I'm happy to take a look at it again
Yeah.
and have more conversations. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we just need to educate them.
Yeah.
And let them be a part of the discussion.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So that's all I have for you for item I.
You've been so busy today, Derek.
Thank you, Derek.
Mary Winston, and I'm getting comments, thank you, staff, that is this going back to a work group?
Mhm.
And just to let you know, you can put it forth again. It doesn't have to, but we just want you to know. And work group sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Because it went once and it didn't go through, but you could go one more time, or you could go through a work group. But that sounds like a great decision.
Yeah, I think so, because I think the education piece is an important part of it, which we could do at a commission meeting, but I think this will give us more time and
Yes.
space to actually have a conversation.
Okay, perfect.
Destiny
Just wanna
Hooper,
make sure.
I had
Yeah.
a comment. I think
Uh-huh.
it's a good idea to rework it because looking at the enforcement division staff report, it was something that came up in November
Mhm.
that a midwife failed to initiate. So maybe they didn't understand the language of it to know what to do.
Yeah. Right.
So it seems like they need more
Okay. Sounds good.
intense language.
Okay.
I'm going to add that Destiny is like one of my favorite public members. Of
I know.
All the public members of all the boards. Just
That's
so
awesome.
engaged.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I think that's probably saying something.
Yeah, it is.
Quite a few boards.
It is. Quite a few boards, quite a few board members.
Yeah.
And
She knows what she's talking
She's not a
about.
midwife, but she's used them and you can tell.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if that's okay, we'll just take that fetal heart rate information and move it to the next agenda item?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
One clarification question.
Mhm.
Is that the only item in the rules that this work group would be expected to readdress? In other words. Does this open up a big can of worms looking at the whole thing again, or is it more specifically focus on this and only do this?
So the work group is not limited to an agenda item.
Okay.
It's less than a quorum, so you can discuss anything of concern to you that you feel needs to be addressed. This is just the one particular thing that did not get fixed, and so we need to find a fix. We need to
Yeah, yeah,
fix it.
yeah.
But if there was anything else that came up that,
Nothing specific, just
You have-
checking.
you have
Just
ideas?
wanted to
Yeah,
know.
Okay.
Well, there was something specific. I'm
Yeah.
looking at a term that says failure to progress in labor, and that.
And what does that mean?
and
Failure
so.
to
And what does
progress
that
in
mean?
labor is a poorly described
Yeah.
term. So.
Agreed.
Well, we do have a little bit of a parking lot for the standard of care work group,
Yeah.
so if you can remember that one for when we
It'll jump out at
meet
me, I'm
again.
pretty
Yeah,
sure.
okay, okay.
Me too.
And so you can also add that as an agenda item for our next meeting if that's something you want to address with the board, or, the work group, like I said, can do it on its own.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so let's move to agenda item J, which is the work group updates and assignments. So I have the list here. We have had 4 work groups: enforcement, licensing, education, and standard of care. So, and we can consider adding a 5th with the human trafficking, or we can consider putting that in education. Maybe we can start there and then assign people after that. Anybody have any thoughts?
I feel like that the trafficking information could go in education quite nicely. That's what we're doing, right? We're just
Yeah.
trying to educate our midwives
Okay.
on what this is. So,
Okay.
as opposed to making a 5th work group, which seems cumbersome.
Okay, okay. Okay. So, so let's talk about people, assigning people to these work groups. Let's start with enforcement. I'm not sure that we have any work to do specifically, but I think it's a good group to have just available.
Are you wanting volunteers?
Yes.
For work groups? I'm just checking.
So, enforcement is just its own work group?
Yes. Christy, would you like to chair that one?
Yes, Christy will chair that one. I will
I
volunteer.
can feel it.
Yes.
I can feel it.
I'm
Okay.
energetic towards it.
Okay.
You bet.
Anybody else? It'd be good to have one other midwife, and it looks like we had 3 midwives previously,
And just to clarify, we're going to be on more than one work group.
most likely.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes. Anybody else? Not Dr. Nix. You only get one, unless you want more. I'm just thinking of your time commitment.
Erica Steele.
Mhm.
Are all 4 of the groups needing people to join them?
Yes, so yes. Each group needs people to chair it, and then just a kind of an even distribution of people, either 3 or 4 people for each work group.
David Gonzalez, TDR, and just so it's not so daunting, y'all are volunteers here. Y'all are taking y'all's extra time. You're going to get support from staff to help coordinate on these things. It is important that we get y'all's feedback and perspective,
Yeah.
but staff is going to be there to support and help guide you. So you're not having to do all this on your own. Just want to make sure that y'all are clear
Yeah,
on that.
yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, the work group process has been actually really great and very supportive, and it's great to have an ongoing dialogue, and so,
Glad to hear it.
yeah.
So enforcement doesn't meet very often?
Currently, no.
Enjoying his face.
Is
Come on,
Vicki
baby.
saying?
I'm willing, but I would want to come off of education.
Okay, yeah,
Okay?
okay,
So I'll go to enforcement if you take me off education.
okay,
Okay. All right. Deal.
okay. All right, let's just keep working on it.
And one more point, David Gonzalez, TDR, one more point. It doesn't have to be in-person meetings, it's conference calls.
Yes.
So if you're concerned about your obligations and travel,
Yeah.
it can be via Skype and other things.
That's true.
Although it's great to be in person.
Why don't we talk about the education work group?
Who's already on the education work group that's still
Well,
a board
Vicky,
member?
Vicky was on it, but we're going to take her off.
I'm
And
done.
Dr. Guillory's on it. I think Dr. Guillory's a nice
She's great.
benefit for that group.
She really is, actually. I
We'll
really
just assign
enjoyed
her
talking with
without her
Yeah,
consent.
keep her there.
Roxanne, I'm wondering if maybe you want to chair it since you have a lot of experience with education over the years. Yes, okay.
Yes, say that louder into the mic. Yeah.
Okay.
She wrote it down, I saw her.
Done. Anyone else want to be on it?
Is Destiny still?
I think I was on it.
Oh, were you on there?
I was in one group.
The list I have does not have you on here, but I think you were on this one.
I think so.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to continue in that? Okay. Erica? I saw you speaking.
I'm happy to be on education or standard of care. I'm happy to be available.
Okay. I'm going to put you here. I'm going to put Erica on education. So we have Roxanne as the chair, Dr. Guillory, Destiny, and Erica. That's a complete work group. Standard of care.
I'm pretty content to stay there if you'll still have me.
Okay. Currently it's me as the chair, Dr. Nix, Vicky. Let's see, if we had 1, 2, 3, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3,
We had Helen.
4.
We had Helen.
We had Helen. Yeah, so we could do
We could
3 midwives and Dr. Nix.
Yes.
On that. Okay. Dr. Nix can handle that.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 And are you writing this? I'm writing it down, but you're getting it? Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
Christy. Yeah.
Okay, that's standard of care and education is taken care of. So we have licensing. One of the things I feel like we need to do is to update our initial licensing requirements. And
I want to do that.
Yeah? Yes, okay.
I'll do it.
Okay,
I will go to licensing.
okay.
I'll even chair it.
Okay. Wow, okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So who else wants to be on that? Christy, you're on 2 already. Roxanne or Erica or me. We have enforcement needs. 1 more person. And licensing could take 2 more people.
Okay. I'll join.
Which one?
So just licensing.
Licensing?
You prefer?
Licensing?
You know, Lori,
Licensing.
I'll follow your I can do either, but not both. So
Okay.
whatever you feel like is the best
Okay,
division of
okay,
resources. I'm happy to go either way with that.
okay. So do you want to be on enforcement then? Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. Destiny, do you want to be on anything else?
Licensing is fine if you need
Licensing?
one more person.
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
1, 2. Okay. I don't feel like we necessarily need a doctor on that one. Do you?
I didn't know what I could, I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out what I could contribute to the licensing.
Yeah.
work, and I don't,
I'm not sure.
sure.
I mean, you're definitely most helpful in the standard of care.
I'm
sure.
happy to be on another work group, I just don't know
Okay.
what my contributions would be. in
Yeah.
another one.
Well, you're thoughtful.
Dr. Nix, if you wanted to join any of these work groups, we'd love to have you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really what your time will allow.
Which one do you need?
Licensing has Vicky, Roxanne, and Destiny, so it could have 1 more. And then enforcement has Christy, Vicky, and Erica,
Can
so
have
that
one
could
more.
have 1 more.
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Do you have a preference?
No.
No? Okay.
Enforcement, I guess.
Enforcement?
Yeah,
That's the one that hasn't met, right?
that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to, wait a minute. 1. You're already on. Oh, I'm the only one that's not on the second one.
That's right.
I'll be on that one, okay.
You want to be on licensing? You want to join licensing?
Okay.
Okay, great.
I was trying to figure out why that wasn't working out. Okay.
Great.
Anna, would it be helpful if we just went through and made sure we had it right? We both have the same thing? Yes. Okay. For enforcement, Christy Martin is the chair. Vicki Meinhardt, Erica Steele, and Dr. Nix. Okay? For licensing, Vicki's the chair, Roxanne, Destiny, and me. For education, which includes the human trafficking, will be Roxanne as the chair, Dr. Guillory, Destiny, and Erica. And then standard of care will be me as the chair, Dr. Nix, Vicki, and Christy Martin. Do you have that? Okay, great. Do we need to make assignments for jobs and work to do? I have ideas.
Of course you do.
David Gonzalez, TR, so as the chair, you have some discretion in that regard.
Okay.
It can be done here, or it can be done as part of the work group.
Okay.
For the ones that you're not on, you might want to do the assignments.
Yes,
here.
okay. That is wise advice, okay.
Immediate assignments. I like this. Just
Yeah.
get down to business.
Yeah. Okay, so, well, the standard of care, we're going to rework that fetal heart rate rule, or at least have a discussion about it and look at a few other things, which I think we already have a list of things we can work on.
Yeah, sounds great.
Education, I feel like, our initial licensing requirements, so this can either go to education or licensing, need to be updated to meet the national standard.
Well, licensing could probably take that on. Is that possible?
Yeah.
What does licensing say about that?
Is that okay, Leonard? Okay.
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 Sure.
Okay. And, anybody have any other thoughts right now? We can certainly revisit this as often as we want. Maybe it might be a good idea for us to all just take a look at the rules again and just see where we could do some updates and some cleaning up and maybe bring that to the next meeting.
The next board meeting?
In the next board meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, so that
I
they could,
mean-
so the advisory board would basically be offering the standards of care work group more work to do? Which is fine.
Yes.
Which is fine, but yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah. Okay, great.
Although I do think that the licensing work group and the standard of care work group could get started
Yeah.
before our next advisory board meeting.
Yes.
Given we had a year in between our last board meeting and this one, I don't think it will be a year again.
No.
Derek Burkhalter, we will have to have a second meeting once
Mhm.
we've published the rules that you approved today. We will have to
Right.
have a second meeting before we send those rules to the commission, so it
Okay.
won't be long before we have a second meeting.
Okay, so the
Great.
timing of that will be in a month-ish?
It'll be more than a month.
Okay.
We'll touch base with you once we have an idea. Once we've actually filed the publication, then we will have a better time frame to poll
Okay.
you on good dates for the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
That'd be great.
All right.
I would love to see a new rules package with some of these updates by the end of the year.
That's a good goal.
Is that possible? Mary, is that possible?
I'm
David,
sorry.
is that possible?
Say what you said.
Depends, David Gonzalez, TR,
Uh-huh.
depends on the rules, because we have
Yeah.
to run these things
Yeah.
through the governor's
Yes.
office. They have to be put out for public comment, and the public comments could extend or hasten the turnaround
Yeah.
on those rules.
Yeah. Okay. But if we could have something presentable by the end of the year to then move through that process.
It's possible.
Is that possible? Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Possibles.
All right. Anything else in that agenda item? People? Okay.
We're set.
Right, let's go to our public comment before we do. Thank you. Okay, Tanya? Tanya, before you start speaking, I just want to remind the board that this is not a discussion time. We're just going to listen. Is there a time limit? 3 minutes, and Anna will keep track? Okay. Okay, Tanya.
Well, I hope that this will be brought up at the next board meeting. So I hope that this since it's not part of what you discussed today, but as I noticed, I'm a midwife from California. I just gotten my Texas license. I've been a midwife 45 years. I have a master's in physiology. I founded the Association for Childbirth at Home International, and I ran a birth center for 40 years that did 5,000 births a year. So I have a lot of clinical experience with obstetrics and midwifery and integrating midwives into the scene. And what I am most concerned about, and when I read the Texas regulations and got my license in Texas, I was actually, to be really candid, I was very pleased with the scope that you let midwives practice, but it was pretty horrifying to see that there were no regulations that allowed midwives to buy, carry, and administer anti-hemorrhage drugs, ROGAM, things that we actually need to meet the national, international, state standard of care. Last night, I reviewed the midwives' laws for California, Washington, New Mexico, Oregon, and every one of those states who license midwives in similar manners to Texas allows midwives to buy, purchase, and administer these drugs because, and I was a member of the California CMQCC, which is California Maternal Quality Care Collaborative, which was founded in 2010, and after they discovered that the maternal death rate tripled in California, tripled in the years from 2000 to 2010. So CMQCC was founded. There's 144 institutions involved in that, including places like the University of Pennsylvania. And I was looking, one of the things that the CMQCC researchers did, myself included, was looked at hemorrhage, maternal hemorrhage, and we discovered that in doing that, it was the two causes that cause women to go from just basically a problem with labor and delivery to a crisis was denial and delay. And if you do not allow, as part of the standard of care, midwives to carry life-saving drugs, you are demanding that midwives meet a community standard, a national standard, an international standard that they cannot meet. Legally, they cannot meet it. So this is something that I feel very passionate about. I'm very concerned about it. And just so you know, 40 years of my career, my original career was in preventing brain injury. And I've been a research scientist for 40 years. So I've done a lot of studies, and so one of the comments, so this is not part of what I was going to say, but I did want to mention that you're looking at standards of care and particularly judging midwives for whether they transferred in a timely manner because of heart tones. But one of the things that midwives need to have, okay, I'll wrap it up. Midwives need to do is they need to be able to affect an intrauterine resuscitation of a crisis case to stabilize a woman and a baby for transfer, and these are things that need to be added to the education, and that's all I wanted to say. But I do think that we really need to look at, and I brought for you a very quick, all of you, a quick synopsis of what happened in California on the tripling of maternal deaths, and I think this addresses nicely and tells nicely into what you guys are going to do. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
And I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know if I have an for everybody, but.
Mary
you make
Winston,
sure
we'll make
that.
copies. We'll make sure we
Yeah,
have
make
copies.
sure Anna gets it, and then she'll distribute it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm sorry this is such a lousy copy, but it's so old, but it's so succinct. Thank you. Yep.
Okay. Okay, let's move to agenda item K, recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting. We can make recommendations now, or we can also email them in as we get closer to the next board meeting. Perhaps we can put work group assignments on, again, just in case we want to revisit
Well,
it.
are we going to try to have a standards of care work group between now and the next board meeting so we have something to report back?
I hope so.
Okay, well, that would
Yeah.
be hopefully on the
Okay.
agenda. And as much as I would like to put Tani's topic on the agenda, I don't know if we can because it's a legislative issue.
I know.
Okay, there we go.
But maybe we can take a look at her information and decide later, a later time.
Sure.
Yeah. Anybody, any other thoughts? Thoughts can come later.
Yes,
Okay.
and Mary Winston, you do have rules, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, so one agenda item will definitely be presenting to you the public comments that were produced as a result of publishing
Okay.
these rules.
Yeah,
And,
great. Right.
You will be able to take action to vote whether or not to present those to the commission.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's move to agenda item L, which is date and discussion, or discussion of date and time and location of the next board meeting.
really quickly,
Yeah.
Mary Winston, thank you, Heather Mirror. Can, I've been instructed to ask you about a work group for the summit, and I'm assuming the next.
You
So-
guys, that's a brilliant
Yes.
idea.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Can we go back to an agenda
Yes,
item
Madam
after
Chair,
we've
you
closed
can.
it? Okay, let's go back to work group, or agenda item J.
Yes.
Okay, that's a great idea, you guys. Okay.
Is it too much to put that under education and examination?
Oh.
My next, it sounds like that is a piece of the education. It seems like it's just falls naturally into that work group.
Okay.
Rather than create a new.
Okay.
As the,
How many non-midwives are on that?
Need to be at the microphone, please, Ms. Katie.
Katie's asking how many non-midwives are on that, and it's Roxanne, Destiny, Dr. Guillory, and Erica. So there's 2 midwives, Consumer and Dr. Guillory. Do you want more midwives? Do you have? We can wait for you, Katie. Thanks.
I'm Katie Bryce with Regulatory Program Management. It would be ideal if the work group consisted of people who would be able to help us come up with ideas and also with coordinating the actual people who would be able to give the presentations.
Okay.
So whoever would have those contacts the best
Okay.
would, it could be a mix of
Okay.
whatever you see fit.
Okay.
That's just what we see the most benefit being, just somebody who can help come up with the ideas, content, and people who can be potential presenters.
Okay.
As the chair of the education committee, I think
Yes.
we can take this on.
You think so?
I do.
Okay, great.
I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I would have what she was saying
Yeah.
would be helpful for
I
that.
think so, too.
I think we
Okay.
can handle that.
Does it have to only be people on the board that present, or we're bringing outside?
I bet you guys can decide, make those decisions. I don't think it has.
You mean teaching at the summit?
Is that what you mean, teaching? 'Cause,
Mhm.
Yeah, it can be anybody.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Have you come? Okay. They're pretty cool.
I just had the baby. And
Yeah, yeah. We understand.
All the midwives understand.
Okay, so let's assign that to the education work group, and What, I'm sorry, now that you're away from the mic, what is the timing of needing that to meet? Because we're having one now, and then the next one is in the summer? Oh.
There you go. Yay. Mercy.
Katie Bryce, yes, we will be starting to meet in probably February for initial planning, and it will be something that meets pretty regularly because it takes a lot of planning.
Okay.
And, you know, we only have about 6 months to get the next one going, and so, I mean, have the next one, and so it is something that will probably be a bit of a commitment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. Okay, can we move back to agenda item L, discussion of date, time, and location for the next board meeting?
Derek Burkhalter. So again, this will be kind of determined by the timeline as far as publication and how many comments we get and things like that. So once we have a better idea of that timeline, we can poll you and find out when a good time would be for each of you.
Okay. Okay. Sounds great. And then we can also get the work groups, get communication on those, timing of those meetings started.
Yeah.
Outside of here. Okay. All right, great. Okay, the meeting is adjourned.